I remember the first time I noticed him. It wasn't the first time I'd seen him. I had walked past that corner almost every day for months. Same man, same spot, same worn-out jacket, same paper cup with a few coins clinking inside. But there's a difference between seeing and noticing, and that difference became very clear to me on a quiet afternoon when, for some reason, I actually stopped walking in my mind, even though my feet kept moving. Maybe you've had that kind of moment too, the kind where you catch yourself in the middle of an ordinary scene and feel a strange, soft question rise inside you. What am I really looking at? What kind of person am I being right now? That day, the street was busy but not rushed. Some people were on their phones, some were carrying coffee cups, some had that familiar city expression that lives somewhere between boredom and mild irritation. Cars rolled by. A bus hissed as it pulled up. And on the corner, as always, sat the homeless man, back against the same wall, head a little bowed as if he was trying to take up less space than he already did. People walked past him the way they walked past the lampposts and trash cans, not with cruelty, exactly, but with a practiced kind of invisibility. No eye contact. No words. A few coins here and there, dropped in almost like a reflex. A small performance of concern without any real slowing down. I was one of those people. I'd tell myself I was in a hurry, even on days when I wasn't. Sometimes I felt a sting of guilt, and I would compensate with a few coins, as if I were paying a small tax to silence my conscience. But I never stopped long enough to really be with him as a person. He was background. Until the day he wasn't. It happened in a way I didn't expect. There was nothing dramatic about it. No argument, no emergency, no sudden shout in the crowd. Just another ordinary day. Another walk down the same street. But on that day, I noticed someone else on that corner. At first I only saw his back, a man in a simple black jacket, sitting on the curb beside the homeless man, legs stretched out casually in front of him, hands clasped between his knees. The homeless man was talking. The other man was listening, his head slightly tilted, as people streamed around them like water around two stones in a river. I don't know what made me pay closer attention. Maybe it was the stillness of their posture, or the strange contrast of two people sitting shoulder to shoulder on a sidewalk that everyone else seemed determined to pass over. Maybe it was the fact that the man in the black jacket didn't look like he belonged there at all, not because he was more important or better dressed, but because he looked fully present in a place where most of us tried hard not to be. As I drew closer, I caught a glimpse of his face. I recognized him immediately. Keanu Reeves. He was just sitting there. No cameras. No security. No crowd gathered around him. If anyone else recognized him, they didn't show it. He wasn't giving a speech or making a show of kindness. He was simply next to the homeless man, knees almost touching, shoulders turned slightly toward him, like this was the most natural place in the world to be. For a brief moment, time slowed. I saw the homeless man's face more clearly than I ever had. He wasn't looking down or away. His eyes were focused, alive, almost animated as he talked. His hands moved as he told his story, whatever it was, punctuating sentences in the air. He looked like a man who, for the first time in a very long while, felt seen. And I realized, uncomfortably, that I had no idea what his voice sounded like. I had passed him countless times, close enough to hear him clearly, and yet I had never once listened. Keanu, this man whose name everyone knew, was sitting on the bare concrete, listening quietly to a man whose name none of us had ever cared to learn. I walked by them, pretending not to stare, but my mind did what my feet had refused to do all those months. It stopped. As I continued down the street, I couldn't shake the image of the two of them side by side. Something about it pressed against a part of me I didn't usually look at very closely. I found myself asking questions I hadn't wanted to ask before. Why does it take a famous face for me to notice a forgotten one? Why did this moment touch me when his presence alone, day after day, had not? I think that was the real beginning of the story, not the moment Keanu Reeves sat on the sidewalk, but the moment I realized how resistant I had been to my own empathy, how carefully I had managed not to feel. I kept walking, but I wasn't really noticing where I was going. I turned corners. I crossed streets, but my mind stayed back there on that curb. Keanu wasn't doing anything particularly grand. He wasn't handing over a large sum of money, at least not that I could see. He wasn't recording a message or making anyone clap. He was just giving his time and his attention, two of the simplest, and somehow most difficult, things to give. He sat beside the man, not above him. He listened, and in that stillness, he allowed the homeless man to be someone more than a silent fixture on a busy street. I thought about how often we say, "We are all human," and how rarely we act like it when humanity shows up in a form that makes us uncomfortable. The next day, I walked down the same street at around the same time. The homeless man was there, as usual. But something was different. People were looking at him, not in the old way, where their eyes slid across him like water over glass, but in a more tentative, unsure manner, as if he had somehow shifted categories overnight. He was no longer just the homeless guy on the corner. He was the man Keanu Reeves sat with yesterday. I overheard two people talking quietly near the crosswalk. "Is that the guy?" one asked. "Yeah, I think so," the other replied. "The one Keanu was talking to." They watched him for a moment, then one of them walked over and handed him a sandwich and a bottle of water. Not in a rushed, half-hearted way, but with something like awkward respect. The man smiled broadly, showing missing teeth, and said thank you in a voice I was hearing clearly for the first time. Another passerby stopped a little further down the sidewalk and dropped a few coins into his cup, then stayed for a brief moment to ask how he was doing. It was a short exchange, but it was real conversation, not the automatic "here you go" tossed over a shoulder on the way to somewhere else. The street hadn't transformed into a utopia overnight. People were still hurrying, still glued to screens, still lost in their own worlds. Many still passed him without a glance, but there was a subtle shift in the air, like something that had been tightly sealed was now slightly open. The man hadn't moved. His clothes were the same. His circumstances were, as far as I knew, unchanged. What had shifted was the lens through which we viewed him. He had become, in the eyes of the street, somehow more human. And that realization made me uncomfortable, because he hadn't become more human at all. He had always been human. What had changed was our willingness to recognize it. I thought about that all week. I thought about how easily we attach worth to those who are visible, recognizable, public. How quickly we borrow value from the people we admire and extend it, conditionally, to whoever they choose to notice. It's as if we are saying, if someone important pays attention to you, then maybe you're worth my attention too. There was something both beautiful and unsettling in that. Beautiful, because one person's simple act of attention had softened an entire street, even if only slightly. Unsettling, because it revealed how dependent our compassion can be on social signals, on who we think deserves our gaze. Over the next few days, I deliberately slowed down when I passed that corner. The first time I stopped, I didn't know what to say. I hovered for a few seconds, then finally managed, "Hey, how are you doing today?" He looked up, surprised, then gave me the same smile I had seen him give the others. His eyes were tired but bright. "Oh, you know," he said in a rough, warm voice. "Same corner, different day." Then he chuckled. We talked for a minute or two. Nothing deep, Not at first. The weather, the traffic, the way the pigeons here seemed too bold for their own good. But as we spoke, I noticed something inside me soften, some layer of defensive distance I had built up without knowing. The next day, I stopped again, this time long enough to ask his name. He told me. It felt strange that I had passed him so many times without knowing that simplest of facts. Saying his name out loud felt like stepping through a doorway that had always been there, waiting. As days turned into weeks, I learned small pieces of his story. Not in a dramatic, confessional way, but through slow, ordinary exchanges. A detail here, another there, like someone adding strokes to a painting that had long been nothing more than a vague outline. He had once had a job. A simple one, but steady. He had once had a small apartment. He had once had people who occasionally called to check in. Then a series of quiet misfortunes, an illness that kept him from working, a job lost, a landlord who wouldn't wait for back rent, a few strained relationships that didn't survive the weight of dependency and disappointment. No single moment of catastrophe, just a gradual slipping through the cracks, one missed step at a time, until the ground simply wasn't there anymore. Listening to him, I realized something. It didn't take much imagination to see how I, or almost anyone I knew, could end up closer to his reality than we like to admit. We like to believe that our lives are stable because we are responsible, or smart, or hardworking. But there is a quiet arrogance in that belief, a refusal to acknowledge how much of our stability rests on things we don't control. Health, timing, the patience of others, an accident that never happened, a chance conversation that led to a job, the fact that someone, somewhere, decided to give us another chance instead of closing a door. As I walked away from our conversations, I found myself thinking not just about him, but about the invisible threads that hold my own life together, and how easily they could fray. In that sense, the day Keanu Reeves sat beside that man did change the whole street. But the change wasn't magical or mysterious. It was quiet, almost fragile. One person chose to sit where no one else would, to listen where everyone else had learned to tune out. That small act disrupted the script, just enough for others to reconsider their lines. We tend to imagine transformation as something loud and cinematic, a stirring speech, a dramatic rescue, a sudden reversal of fortune. But most of the change I saw on that street was subtle and slow. It happened in micro-moments, an extra second of eye contact, a few more people saying hello, another person choosing to stop rather than rush past. And maybe more importantly, a quiet shift inside individuals like me, who are forced to confront the gap between what we say we believe about human dignity and how we actually behave in the wild, messy world of sidewalks and strangers. I don't know what Keanu and the homeless man talked about that day. I don't need to. What matters to me is what that image revealed, that our presence, when given sincerely, is more powerful than we think, and that we don't have to be famous for it to matter. The world will probably never know that man's full story. There will be no headlines about the time I stopped to listen, or the time the woman with the red scarf brought him lunch, or the day the coffee shop on the corner started giving him a cup for free when they had extra. These acts won't trend or circulate widely, but to him, they are not small. To the people who offered them, they quietly reshaped who they understood themselves to be. Sometimes I wonder what that street would have been like if none of us had ever seen Keanu sit there. Would the man still be invisible to us? Would I have ever learned his name, or stopped long enough to hear the details of his life? It's hard to say. There's a certain humility, I think, in acknowledging that sometimes we need to be reminded of our own capacity for kindness. We like to think we are naturally good, naturally compassionate, naturally awake to the suffering around us. But the truth is, modern life gives us 1,000 reasons every day to look away. It took the presence of someone I admired, a a public figure known for his gentleness, for me to finally examine my own inattention. I don't feel ashamed of that as much as I feel grateful. The important thing is not that it took a nudge, but that I allowed myself to be nudged. And once you've been nudged, you can't quite go back to sleep in the same way. Over time, the novelty of the corner where Keanu Reeves once sat faded. People stopped talking about it. New events, new distractions, new minor excitements took its place. The street went back to being a street, noisy and busy and full of its own concerns. But for some of us,